So, one of the biggest talking points in the Naruto universe is the concept of chakra levels. Some people's chakra levels are high, some people's are notoriously low, some people are able to improve their chakra levels, while others seem stuck at a relatively meager level. And while the concept of chakra levels plays a large part in the early parts of Naruto, it seems as though as we get later on in the story, towards the war arc and the ending of Shippuden, that the whole idea of definable chakra levels kind of gets thrown out the window. As well, in the early days of part 1 of Naruto, there was hard limits to how many jutsu somebody could do with their preset chakra levels, like Kakashi only being able to use Kamui a couple times, or Sasuke only being able to use Chidori twice in a day. But slowly, as power scaling got completely out of control in the war arc, it seems as though that idea of modesty and only being able to use a jutsu a couple times just kind of disappeared. And while a lot of that can be tied to Naruto tapping into the full power of Kurama and being able to share that power with the entirety of the Shinobi Alliance, even outside of the confines of Naruto helping other people with their limits on their chakra levels, it seems as though the idea of a ninja having a battery did kind of peter out once the real fighting started. Though somewhat ironically and probably intentionally by Kishimoto, as he's trying to downscale the combat in Boruto to a more ninja realistic level as compared to Shippuden, which was people controlling chakra mechs, it seems as though the idea of a chakra battery has been reintroduced in Boruto, with people like Sasuke using incredibly chakra depletive techniques like opening giant space-time ninjutsu portals to allow people to travel between dimensions, and then feeling the actual repercussions of using that much chakra on a jutsu. And to me, I actually prefer that, because I prefer consequences to high-level moves and the establishment of boundaries and laws on how all of this nonsense is supposed to work. The inconsistencies in this story's ability to stick to the idea of chakra levels makes sitting down and actually logically and scientifically approaching this story and its massive cavalcade of characters, all of whom have very different levels of chakra, and taking a small handful from that group and saying these people have the most chakra, and here they appear in a 1 to 10 list, is actually very difficult. Because, well, yes, if the entirety of Naruto's lore had played out like part 1 of Naruto, it would be rather simple. If we ever saw somebody use 3 Chidoris in a day, we would say, oh, they got more chakra than Sasuke. But Kakashi went from being able to use Kamui once or twice a day to 18 times in one day in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. Naruto, when he first unlocked KCM2, was only able to use it for 5 minutes, but by the end of the war, he was able to use it indefinitely. The activation of the Sharingan, let alone the MS, used to be a massive deal, and only happened for set amounts of time. But with the introduction of characters like War Kakashi, Sasuke, Madara, and Obito, those rules kind of flew out the window. And that's kind of hard to scale people that we got to see fight in the 4th Great Shinobi World War while they were still alive, because we have to account Edo Tensei into all of this, against people that we didn't get to see fight in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. Because people who didn't get to fight in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, at least as alive participants, didn't get to experience the power creep that the alive participants of the 4th Great Shinobi World War got to experience. But accomplishing difficult tasks is a large part of my job. So who am I to complain? It's not like we've never made a list that people haven't agreed with before. But after poring over the sacred text for a couple of hours and looking into some of the most important feats as they pertain to chakra level scaling in all of Naruto and Boruto, I believe I have a definitive list of the top 10 humans with the highest chakra levels. No, we're not including Otsutsuki's. That's boring. There's 6 of them. They take up the entire list if you're doing a top 10. There's actually 8 of them, so just an entire list. But with no further ado, let's get into the top 10 highest chakra levels in all of Naruto, ranked and explained. And for those of you who have followed the page for a while, 1, thank you, and 2, you might be saying, but Nick, didn't you do a video like this about a year ago? And the answer is, yes, I did. But I currently feel as though I have much more information in my head about Naruto than I did a year ago, mostly because I was in the process of moving between houses when I filmed that video, and I've gone back and watched it. I just don't agree with the list I made. So consider this the more informed and more accurate version of the video I made about a year ago. A supplementary part 2, if you shall. But before we get to parting anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me ranking and explaining things from your favorite anime, then you're gonna love my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. And if you just love the idea of me talking anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything happening in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you want to see me live, come on down to Comic Palooza this Memorial Day weekend, May 24th to the 26th, down in Houston, Texas. I'm going to be doing 6 panels talking about anime, doing a podcast, talking about being an anime YouTuber, all that jazz. Before we get into all that, today we got to talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, G Fuel, who is dedicating the entire month of May to anime, or as they call it, anime. And while I would make the argument that G Fuel is committed to being in touch with the anime community in more months than just May, I mean, this is my favorite flavor, Naruto Sage Mode, G Fuel wants the world to know that they're the leaders in anime collaborations and partnerships. I mean, this is just what was on my desk. But G Fuel has made it incredibly evident through their flavors like Sage Mode and Kamehameha, both of which are delicious, mind you, that anime is a core part of who they are as a company. And while I love seeing respect for the OG animes with their own respective delicious flavors, personally, if it came down to me, I would love for G Fuel to go further with their anime collaborations and collab with my favorite anime of all time, Hunter x Hunter. I mean, for a company that's already collaborated with My Hero Academia, Mobile Suit Gundam, Dragon Ball, Naruto, Crunchyroll, and so many other more, a Hunter x Hunter or a JJK flavor would blow me out of the water. Because not only does G Fuel make sure I have enough clean energy to get through the day and film as much content for you as I can, but the tubs are really cool decorations, which is why I actually have them behind me in my display cases. So if I could get a Hunter x Hunter Godspeed flavor or a JJK Black Flash flavor, not only would I have a brand new flavor to try that gives me clean energy and helps my focus at the low cost of 0 sugar, but I'd have a couple more anime trinkets to decorate this barren room with. So what are you waiting for? Head to the link in my description or use code NCHAMMER at checkout to get 20% off your purchase of G Fuel today. You, Anna, may want to look into G Fuel. So one of the biggest talking points that I want to center this video around is actually centered around a relatively new understanding of chakra that I've begun to work my way into. See, I want to center this video around the concept of usable chakra, because there is a lot of people in Naruto who have insane levels of chakra. However, they don't have access to 100% of this chakra. Now, while this is a somewhat rare occurrence, it's mostly seen amongst Jinchuriki. People who are Jinchuriki have powerful tailed beasts, but not perfect Jinchuriki, and therefore they don't have access to the entirety of their tailed beast chakra. On top of this, this concept is also applicable to people who need to use things like the 8th gates or the tricolored pills to access the entirety of their body's potential. And thus, while these people at the height of their powers could very easily be considered for a list like this, because of the caveat of either they can't access that power or they need to die to access that power, I can't really put them on this list in good conscience. On top of this, I'm going to be trying to approach this video as mathematically as possible. I mean, we are talking about chakra levels here, which should be able to be defined through the medium of numbers. However, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, putting any kind of number behind feats done in Naruto is basically impossible because a lot of feats aren't reproduced. Now, if I had 2 people who did the exact same thing and it made one of them more tired than the other, then yeah, that's reproducible. It's been reproduced, and I can use those 2 plot points to compare and see who's got more chakra. But the beauty of Naruto is that everybody's an individual butterfly who uses their own strengths and abilities. And in no case is that unfortunately more accurate than our honorable mention on this list, Kisame.
Nick, what do you mean Kisame is the tailless tail beast? How did he even make top 10?
He's hard to quantify. See, basically the reason that anybody would ever include Kisame on a list like this is because he was chosen by Samehada. And as we all know, when Samehada isn't battling against somebody like Killer Bee and absorbing their chakra, it's constantly absorbing the chakra of the user. And thus the only people who are able to wield Samehada, at least at a high level, have insane amounts of chakra. However, another large talking point that surrounds Samehada is that Samehada has to like the chakra of its wielder. Because here's the thing, if Samehada only ever chose the highest chakra source it could find, it would have chose Naruto. As I don't know if any of you remember this, but Naruto at one point does pick up Samehada, and Samehada barbs his hands. If Samehada was looking for the highest possible ground, it would have gone with Naruto. Now, possibly if Naruto was in a KCM2 cloak, Samehada would have chosen him because Samehada very clearly likes tailed beast chakra, or at least Gyuki's chakra. But at the same time, Samehada choosing Killer Bee was a choice made by both Kisame and Samehada to sneak into the Hidden Cloud Village, which is also something that people seem to forget fairly often. Obviously, Kisame's got some wild chakra feats, like covering entire forests in water to create a massive sea battlescape in the middle of the woods. A level of water release that only 1 or maybe 2 other people in the entire story could do. But since the majority of Kisame's feats usually come through the medium of him absorbing other people's chakra through Samehada, it's hard to quantify what his upper boundary is without the constant pull of other people's chakra. And really the best possible scale we could get into for finding out Kisame's chakra levels is when Nagato decides to make 30% clones of Kisame and Itachi, of which it takes Killer Bee up until the 6th gate to kill that 30% clone. This unfortunately has much less to do with chakra levels and more to do with power. Because another wild misconception that people have about this battle between 6th Gate Guy and 30% Kisame is that this is a 30% powered Kisame. No, it's a 100% powered Kisame who also has a perfect replica of Samehada. For some reason, that's how Nagato's ability works, but he only has 30% of Kisame's chakra, and when he runs out of that chakra, he dies. But if we use that battle as a scale to say this is what 1/3 of Kisame's chakra looks like, it actually doesn't look that good for Kisame. This battle just objectively opened with Kisame flooding a desert valley to make it a sea battlefield. As we all know, using water release without water nearby is actually very difficult and chakra taxing, so this is impressive. But beyond the scope of this, Kisame uses Shark Bomb Jutsu once, a jutsu called 500 Sharks that allows him to create chakra sharks underwater. He makes 3 water clones, which are not as strong as regular clones that use water prison jutsu against Team Guy, that being 10-10, Neji, and Rock Lee. And that's it. Might Guy activates 6th Gate, hits a kick against Kisame, throws a flurry of punches into him, he falls into the water, and then he's cooked. And while we are talking about 6th Gate Might Guy here, the guy who went 1v1 against a 1 Rinnegan Madara and almost won, we're talking about chakra levels here, because when you run out of chakra, that's when Nagato's clone jutsu thing turns you back into a regular, now dead human being. And if that's what 30% of Kisame's chakra looks like, it's actually not great, but he does belong to be at least mentioned on this list, which is why he's an honorable mention. And if you wanted to put Kisame in your top 10, genuinely, I couldn't blame you. But now let's get to the actual top 10 itself, which is a list of veritable heavy hitters. Because coming in at number 10 is the professor himself, Hiruzen. See, we know very, and I mean very little about what Prime Hiruzen was capable of. However, we do know that he's one of a very, and I mean very small handful of people that fought in every single great shinobi world war. And since the accumulation of chakra, and therefore the increasing of your chakra levels, is tied to getting physically stronger and practicing your jutsu more often, having 4 wars worth of experience is definitely gonna help you out just a smidge. I could sit here and try and scale the fact that Hashirama was able to push Kurama out of Konoha with his monkey Enma staff, or the fact that he was able to be one of the 4 people involving in sealing the 10 tails and therefore a 10 tails tailed beast bomb in a 4-sided Hokage level barrier in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. None of those are really quantifiable feats. But Hiruzen, well, old man Hiruzen does have one quantifiable feat, and that is using the Reaper Death Seal on Tobirama, Hashirama, and Orochimaru. Now, to this point that we're going to be introducing our scale for this video. I'm going to hit you with a little bit of a surprise bomb here. Number 1 on this list is Naruto. And Naruto was said by Kakashi to have 4 times more chakra than him, but 100 times more chakra than him if you take into account Kurama. Now, some people will say,
Oh, but Kakashi has no actual way of scaling how much chakra Naruto has. Especially when we consider the fact that when Kakashi said this, Naruto wasn't able to access KCM2 yet, and therefore couldn't use the entirety of Kurama's chakra, so how does Kakashi know what the entirety of Kurama's chakra looks like?
1, Kakashi is a well-noted, incredible sensor ninja. Let's not forget that there was literally one person who was able to stumble upon Kashin Koji in Konoha when they broke in Boruto. And that one person was Kakashi. Well, people like Ino, the entire sensory department, which is now as big and powerful as it's ever been, and Naruto were all present in the village. And 2, sensing chakra capacity is something we've seen happen multiple times throughout Naruto. In fact, one of the most prominent moments of somebody looking at another person and going, wow, that chakra, was Karin looking at Naruto. And sure, she was talking about Naruto's aura more than the capacity of Naruto's chakra. Sensing chakra levels is menial work, especially for those who have dojutsus, because I don't know if you remember this, but while the Byakugan absolutely has the ability to see how much chakra is running through somebody's body, so does the Sharingan. And while the Byakugan does a better job of it, the Sharingan does have a rudimentary version of chakra sensing that the Byakugan has. On top of this, Kakashi just knows how powerful Kurama is. He was there on the night of Minato and Kushina's death. He saw Kurama get pushed out of the village by Hiruzen, and thus whether you like it or not, Kakashi saying that Naruto has roughly 100 times the chakra he has, with half of Kurama, is one of the best and most quantifiable ways we have to adjust our idea of how much chakra individual ninjas in Naruto have. This means that Boruto Naruto, the strongest version of Naruto we ever got prior to his nerfing, would have about 200-ish times the amount of chakra as that version of Kakashi, which was early Shippuden Kakashi, before his awakening that allowed him to use Kamui all the time. So this isn't even the highest level of Kakashi. But if we set the scale that Boruto Naruto with the entirety of Kurama has 200 chakra in the unit scaling of Kakashi's, we can then move forward based off feats we've seen throughout Naruto Shippuden, and Boruto and give a quantifiable number in terms of how much chakra a person has in terms of Kakashi's. And while, believe it or not, the Kakashi system isn't gonna be deadly accurate, it's the best thing I can think of. And why am I saying all of this right now? Well, because if there's one person who's quantifiable in the Kakashi scale, it's Hiruzen. See, to loop back to it one more time, Hiruzen uses the Reaper Death Seal against Edo Tensei, Tobirama, Hashirama, and Orochimaru. And for those of you who don't remember how Reaper Death Seal works, it is a chakra tug-of-war. If the caster has more chakra than the person they are casting the Reaper Death Seal on, they'll be able to pull the entirety of their soul out of their chest and feed it to the Reaper. However, if they have less chakra than the person that they're trying to seal, they'll only be able to seal part of them, which is why Hiruzen in his advanced age wasn't able to seal all of Orochimaru, just their arms. But an aspect of this that is often forgotten is that Hiruzen also sealed Tobirama and Hashirama. Now, does this mean that Hiruzen has more chakra than Hashirama, Tobirama, and a part of Orochimaru combined? No. I mean, technically, it could. You could make as much of an argument for that being reality as you could for it not being reality. When Kishimoto was writing this part of the story, I genuinely don't think he knew how strong he was going to make Hashirama. But the usual line of logic here is that Hashirama and Tobirama were not at their full strength when being summoned by Orochimaru. And that tracks with pretty much everything we've seen from either Hashirama or Tobirama. First, it's important to note that even if this version of Hashirama and Tobirama did come at their full strength, Orochimaru at this point in their Edo Tensei career, I guess, approached Edo Tensei from the perspective of controlling all the shinobi they brought back to life, which is the complete opposite of Kabuto, who would bring people back to life, give them a directive that they couldn't disobey, and then set them free, which allowed them to fight at their full capacity because they're using their own body. They know their own techniques. But it's very clear that this version of Hashirama and Tobirama are not at full strength. I mean, Tobirama doesn't use shadow clones, identify that they're being used through Edo Tensei, or use flying Raijin, while the level of wood release that Hashirama uses is minimal at best. Yes, he does a deep force emergence, but we saw the deep force emergences that Madara and Hashirama were able to do in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, and we know the entire forest around Konoha was created by Hashirama. On top of this, Hashirama doesn't use Sage Mode, and therefore none of his Senjutsu abilities like Thousand Arm Guanyi, and thus it's generally assumed that this is a roughly 20% strength Tobirama and Hashirama. I mean, the level of water release that Tobirama is still able to do is able to cover the entire battlefield in water like we were talking about earlier with Kisame. And thus, if we assume that this is a 20% Hashirama, a 20% Tobirama, and that Hiruzen gets about 20% of Orochimaru's soul, his arms, we can assume that since Hashirama says during the war arc, while looking out at all of Naruto's chakra spread about the Shinobi Alliance, which was a mix of Naruto and half of Kurama's chakra at that moment, and says, oh, this is about as much chakra as I had when I was alive, implying that Hashirama, while alive at his peak, is probably equal to KCM2 plus Sage Mode plus half of Kurama Naruto. We can assume that if Boruto Naruto is roughly 200, that Hashirama is roughly 100, which would mean that in order to pull out 20% of his soul using the Reaper Death Seal, Hiruzen would need at least 20. And if we assume that Tobirama has about half the chakra of Hashirama because he was a full-blooded Senju but not Asura's reincarnation, that means that Hiruzen would need 10 to pull out Tobirama's. And if we assume that Orochimaru at this point, which was the strongest version of Orochimaru we ever saw up until Orochimaru got a white Zetsu body, which should hypothetically be stronger than versions of Orochimaru we saw in subsequent battles, like their battle against Version 2 Four-Tailed Naruto, which saw them using the triple Rashomon gates to stop a tailed beast ball. And we run this statement tangentially with the fact that Orochimaru has been confronted by Kakashi twice, and in both of those situations, Kakashi went, "Welp, I'm gonna die." Assuming that Orochimaru, who is a failed sage, but still has the ability to collect Senjutsu chakra, as they're able to distribute it to those with curse seals, has roughly 5-ish times more chakra than Kakashi. As I like to remind you that the reason that Orochimaru failed becoming a sage wasn't because they didn't have a massive amount of chakra, it was because their body was too weak to undergo the transformation. If Hiruzen was able to pull out 20% of Orochimaru's soul, that would mean that was one Kakashi, which would mean at At last place in 10th, Hiruzen clocks in at 31 Kakashis, which I'm aware seems high, but I'd like to remind you this feat from Hiruzen is insane. But not as insane as our next feat, because coming in at number 9, we have Sakura. See, when trying to figure out how much usable chakra Sakura has, there's a lot of things I could go off, especially if I wanted to consider that for all intents and purposes, Sakura and Tsunade should have a comparable amount of chakra, and therefore you could just as easily have Tsunade in this spot. In fact, you should consider this spot Tsunade and Sakura shared. But while there is a ton of things I could use to scale Sakura or Tsunade's chakra levels, like the fact that Tsunade, after being bisected in the 4th Great Shinobi World War by Madara, bites Karine and refills her strength of 100 seal, and this literally taps Karine out of all of her chakra, implying that Tsunade at full strength with a full strength of 100 seal, presumably, we don't know if it's full, has as much chakra as Karine. Genuinely, the best way to scale how much chakra does the strength of 100 seal have happens in the battle against Kaguya, is when Obito is telling a clone of Naruto, Sakura, and Kakashi that in order to resonate his Kamui to Kaguya's Yamatsu Hirasaka, her ability to open those square-looking portals that allow her to jump between dimensions that all Otsutskis have, that he would need an insane amount of chakra. To this point, that the clone of Naruto steps up and says, well, I can provide you chakra, but Obito says that the chakra provided by just this clone wouldn't be enough. And immediately after that, Sakura, who still has her strength of 100 seal, says, what if I activate my strength of 100 seal? And Obito says, that would be the bare minimum chakra necessary for me to resonate my Kamui to the Yamatsu Hirasaka and allow us to get to Kaguya's location. And while a lot of people took this as,
oh, that means that Sakura has more chakra than half of Naruto,
it's important to note that at this point, Naruto was battling against Kaguya, and he had just been battling against Madara, and he had literally just brought Obito basically back to life. However, this was post-Hagoromo boost, and therefore this was Sage of Six Paths KCM2 Sage Mode Naruto. So in actuality, at this point, Naruto probably had close to 120 or 130 Kakashis of chakra, as accessing KCM2 gives him the ability to use all of Kurama's chakra, add Sage of Six Paths mode onto there, and stacking KCM2 with Sage mode, and yeah, you're probably looking at anywhere from a 20% to 50% increase. But for lowballing how much chakra Naruto has at this moment, let's say 60 Kakashis, half of his full potential after a very long day of fighting, and considering the fact that Naruto has one shadow clone at this moment, and therefore both he and his shadow clone have 30 Kakashis worth of chakra, this would mean that Sakura would have to have more than that. We can say that Sakura in this moment, with this very rough calc, probably has somewhere in the capacity with the entirety of her strength of 100 seals around 35 Kakashis, which is an important calculation for down the line, because Obito talking about the difficulty of space-time ninjutsu is very important for when we get to talking about Sasuke, especially in Boruto. Now, after Sakura, Tsunade, and possibly Karine, who all clock in at a very similar amount of chakra. At number 8, we have somebody who's albeit impossible to scale in the terms of Kakashis, because the majority of the things that they've done as a character have never been compared to any other characters, and they haven't been reproduced. And that's because coming in at number 8, we have the 3rd Raikage. See, there's a jutsu that runs in the Raikage clan. At least it runs between the 3rd and the 4th Raikages, who are father and son, admittedly. And that jutsu is the Lightning Cloak, and its offensive adaptation, the Lightning Stab, which is essentially, in all the ways that matter, a full-body Chidori. See, if the Chidori is encapsulating your hand in lightning because you're trying to apply lightning release to a Rasengan, Lightning Cloak, and therefore by extension, Lightning Stab, is just applying lightning release to the entirety of your body. And therefore, in a capacity, it's kind of like a lightning-based personal Susanoo, as the combination of the Lightning Cloak and the Lightning Stab were considered to be the perfect sword and shield combo. 1, because of the incredible defensive prowess given to him by the Lightning Cloak, and 2, because in the 3rd Great Shinobi World War, he covered the retreat of his soldiers back to the Land of Lightning against 10,000 shinobi for 72 hours. 3 days. See, while I did compare the Lightning Cloak to an electrified Susanoo earlier, I don't necessarily mean Lightning Cloaks as hard to use as the Susanoo. Nothing we've ever seen about the Lightning Cloak even infers that in the slightest. However, electrifying the entirety of your chakra and keeping it around you in a thick enough layer that nobody's able to penetrate it is incredibly chakra depletive. On top of that, the application of Lightning Cloak isn't ninjutsu or taijutsu, it's actually nin taijutsu, and thus the usage of Lightning Cloak is used to amp the user's speed, strength, and cutting ability, which means that Lightning Cloak isn't something you activate and launch from a distance. No, there is very much a physical component to using it. And as Chakra is life force, adding a physical component on top of keeping lightning enveloped around your entire body for 3 days straight is one of the craziest Chakra level feats we've ever seen. And when you consider the fact that the baseline that we're using for this scale is Kakashi, who in the beginning of Naruto was only able to use the Chidori 3 or 4 times in a day, while the technical application of the Lightning Cloak means that you have a constantly activated Chidori that you're using to stab through people, possibly for 3 days straight, would imply that even applying a Lightning Cloak to yourself in the first place would be comparably chakra taxing to the activation of 1 Chidori, let alone the idea of keeping that Lightning Cloak applied to yourself as you battle back against 10,000 shinobi. Because for what reason should the application of Lightning Cloak be any less taxing than Chidori? If anything, it should actually be more taxing. And while we know very little about the standoff between A and these 10,000 shinobi that were chasing his forces back into the Land of Lightning, and therefore we cannot say for certain as to whether or not he had his Lightning Cloak activated for those 72 hours, his moniker of the Perfect Shield and his body coming back the way that it was killed, that is, with only 1 scar on it, where he stabbed himself, implies to us that he probably didn't incur a whole lot of wounds in this battle against these 10,000 shinobi, which leads most people to believe that either, like how Naruto dispatched of him in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, he stabbed himself once again with a Hell Stab, or in the battle against the 10,000 shinobi, he simply ran out of chakra and died of depletion sickness. Using the state of his body to argue how he died is kind of a frivolous cause in Naruto, because if all the Edo Tensei people were brought back the way that they died, it'd probably be pretty ugly. Regardless, to assume that the guy who has technically the longest battle feat in the entirety of Naruto has some of the most chakra in Naruto isn't insane. So we'll put him in that 35 to 40 Kakashi's range. I mean, it seems fair. Kakashi's greatest chakra feat is actually after he loses his Sharingan, and it's him maintaining a mud wall that's under barrage from lightning attacks for 12 hours, after which he is absolutely wiped. That means that a version of Kakashi that has more battle experience by a lot, and who doesn't have the chakra drain of a Sharingan he can't deactivate, was only able to be in a constant battle for 12 hours, while the 3rd Raikage did it for 60 hours on top of that. But enough about the person with the most impressive time feat in all of Naruto. What about the person with the second most impressive time feat in all of Naruto? Because coming up at number 7, we have Madara. And no, I'm not talking about Jubidara. Yes, I'm aware that Jubidara, by tapping into the 10 tails, would probably have some of the most chakra we've ever seen, but by tapping into the 10 tails, that basically makes you an Otsutsuki. And if we want to count Jubito and Jubidara on this list, that's actually 10 Otsutsukis. So we are considering a live Madara. By the way, I'm just gonna do it real quick in case you're curious, because I don't want anybody yell at me. Hagoromo, he's technically got infinite chakra. Kaguya's right below him. She's literally the 10 tails. Madara, perfect 10 tails Jinchuriki, plus his massive chakra reserves to begin with. Fused Momoshiki. Jubito wasn't a perfect 10 tails Jinchuriki, couldn't control all of the chakra. Ishiki, just nothing all that impressive in terms of chakra feats. Like, yeah, he can absorb things, but we just don't know how taxing summoning boxes and chakra rods is. Toneri in Tenseigan mode was able to create a blast that cut the moon in half, which requires an insane amount of chakra, but the Tenseigan mode was really unstable. I mean, Naruto literally punched him out of it, so that's not massive usable quantities of chakra. Urashiki consumed chakra from Gaara and also Naruto, I believe, then was able to break out of a Grand Sand Mausoleum. And then Kinshiki in dead last. I forgot Hamura. Everybody forgets Hamura. Hamura above Toneri, he also had a Tenseigan that he could probably control better than Toneri. Good? Are we good? We're moving on. Madara, time feat. 24 hours, MS. Because yes, after the 3rd Raikage, Madara does have the second most impressive time feat in all of Naruto, and that is battling for 24 hours straight with his MS activated. And as we already established way back in the beginning of this video, activating the Sharingan, and especially the MS, for any amount of time is very impressive. The chakra drain associated is so intense that Itachi was only able to use his MS for a matter of minutes every single day, let alone if he was planning on using something like Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, or Susanoo. On top of this, Madara used MS abilities like they were running out of style. Well, at least he used the Susanoo like it was going out of style. See, because Madara, on top of having one of the largest Susanos of all time, also had a very augmentable Susanoo, as his Susanoo was either a samurai with wings and 4 arms, or a kind of blue, ghouly, titan-looking thing. And which kind of Susanoo Madara was using really boiled down to how many he wanted to use, as Madara is still the only person we've ever seen use multiple Susanos simultaneously. And while this technically only ever happens in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, and therefore you could say, oh, this isn't something Madara was capable of while he was alive, it's important to note that while Madara does come back with a section of Hashirama grafted to him and the perfect body given to him by Kabuto, Hashirama being a part of Madara isn't something he didn't achieve while he was alive. That's how Madara awoke the Rinnegan in the first place. And thus there was vast parts of Madara's life where he was able to tap into Hashirama's healing factor and chakra levels. And thus, while he probably comes back in the war arc with more chakra than he had while he was alive, it's probably not an insane amount more, especially when you consider the fact that at the end of his life, he awoke dual Rinnegan, which would have been a massive chakra suck. So in actuality, the most chakra that Madara ever had was probably immediately after he resurrected himself with Izanagi. As one, he was in peak fighting form, and two, he grafted part of Hashirama's cells onto his body, which allowed him to now have Hashirama's healing factor and chakra. And while it didn't manifest as Rinnegan immediately, it doesn't mean it didn't manifest as Hashirama's cells immediately. So never in the capacity of a big old Hashirama face on his chest that he could use to activate Sage Mode, because that surprised him. So even if we want to assume that Madara in the war arc has double the amount of chakra he ever had while he was alive, Madara in the war arc in a battle against the Hokage creates 10 Susanoo. So if we assume that he could only create 5 while he was alive, that's still 4 more than anybody else has ever made. Not to mention that in that battle that Madara fought with his MS activated for 24 hours, he was battling against Hashirama and Tobirama simultaneously. And while we never really see how Tobirama was involved in that battle, he is there at the end of it. But then again, maybe he just showed up because he wanted to see another Uchiha die. It had been a while since he had gotten to see that. But if we assume that Madara, while alive, was only able to create 5 Susanoo, this means that Madara only needs 20% of his chakra to create a Susanoo, a full-bodied, non-armored Susanoo, which is weird because it's usually either armored and has legs or armored and doesn't have legs, or it's a skeleton with bones. It's a whole weird Titan thing that only he ever did. And therefore, it's probably safe to assume that this weird Titan form thing that Madara does uses less chakra than his full Susanoo. Still, Madara can create a 70% powered Susanoo with 20% of his chakra. Now, Sasuke didn't use the perfect Susanoo until the majestic entire Susanoo he uses in the battle against Chubito with Naruto. But these aren't perfect Susanoo we're talking about. And thus, if we scale back a little bit further, it's probably safe to say that Sasuke's unlegged armed Susanoo, the one with the bow, the one he uses against Danzo, is probably the best power comparison we have in terms of Susanoo to Madara's Titan Susanoo's. And at that time, just pulling off that level of Susanoo was tough for MS Sasuke. So the fact that 1/5 of Madara could pull off a feat of this scale, which means that Madara, while alive, and once again, very rough calc here, probably had roughly 5 times the amount of chakra that Sasuke had. Dual MS Sasuke, that is. And I don't think anybody's under any illusion that Dual MS Sasuke, who was able to keep both of his MSs activated for the entirety of the battle against Danzo and use those MSs over and over and over again, probably had about 10 times the amount of chakra that Kakashi had in early Shippuden. That would place Madara somewhere in the 50 Kakashi's range. But once again, all of this is very rough, and the only reason I'm using the Kakashi scales in the first place is because some of you like numbers. I'm one of them. Now, after Madara, we unfortunately have somebody who's way harder to scale, and it is, like Sakura, Tsunade, and Karin's spot, a shared spot between Kushina and Mito. And Kushina and Mito coming in this low is probably making a couple of you scratch your heads right now. Why on earth would the 2 full-blooded Uzumakis, who are the Jinchuriki of the entirety of Kurama, be this low on the list? And it's basically for this entry that I introduced that caveat earlier of usable chakra. See, because neither Mito nor Kushina could use Kurama's chakra, though it is important to note that they both had Kurama sealed into them with the 8 trigram seal. And what we've learned about the 8 trigram seal, both from Naruto and Minato's one-shot, is that it's specifically designed in order for the tailed beast chakra to leak into the Jinchuriki. This is evidenced by the fact that the key plot point in Minato's one-shot is that Kushina begins to lose control of Kurama and begins to manifest all the way up to a 7-tailed version 2 Jinchuriki cloak, which is basically as far as you can go without beginning to actually look like Kurama. But to say that any of this chakra is usable for either Kushina or Mito is a stretch. Kushina and Mito, so far as we know, could probably tap into Kurama's chakra in a similar capacity to how Naruto in part 1 tapped into Kurama's chakra. That is to say that in emergency situations, it would be possible for them to form a version 1 Jinchuriki cloak of sorts. And even though it doesn't sound all that enticing, it's still a pretty big boost. The 2 women who were uniquely identified in the Uzumaki clan, a clan known for their notoriously high chakra levels and life forces, to be exceptional in that category, with both of their life forces and chakra levels being so high that they both survived having Kurama extracted from them. Something that, mind you, killed Naruto when he had half of Kurama extracted from him. And thus, if you assume that Mito and Kushina have a comparable amount of chakra to Karin, if not probably a little bit more, as Karin was never established to be exceptional amongst the Uzumaki, on top of the possibility of Kushina and Mito possibly being able to tap into 1 to 5% of Kurama's power, if Kurama's power accounts for, let's say, 180 to 170 of Naruto's 200, and we already established that Karin falls in the capacity of 35 Kakashis, while quantifying what exceptional in the Uzumaki means is impossible, obviously, we can probably assume it's somewhere in the capacity of a 50% or so advantage over other Uzumakis. We could say that even without tapping into Kurama's power, Mito and Kushina probably clocked in around 50 Kakashis. Tie that into 1 to 5% of 170, and you get somewhere in the capacity of 55-ish Kakashis. But here's the thing about Kushina and Mito. Neither of them were really shinobi. And like we've already covered in this video, there's two ways to increase your chakra levels. One is physical training, and the other is battles, experience, and actual meditation. As if you increase your spiritual power and your physical power, you create chakra, and more of it running through you. And therefore, a full-blooded Uzumaki, who's also a shinobi, would have a better chance at increasing their chakra levels to never before seen levels, which is why, even though it might sound like heresy because Kushina and Mito were established to be exceptional amongst Uzumakis and Nagato never was, I have Nagato at number 5. Because here's the thing, Nagato is a full-blooded Uzumaki. For some reason, people have been calling him a half Uzumaki recently. He's not, he's full-blooded. His mom had red hair and his last name's Uzumaki, which means his dad's last name was Uzumaki. Do the math, come on. Stick with it. But Nagato receives the Rinnegan at like 3 from Ghost Madara. And thus, as a full-blooded Uzumaki, his body has to immediately equilibrate to the biggest possible chakra drain you can have. And over the course of his lifetime, his body has to grow and adjust to this massive burden that is a dual Rinnegan. And he doesn't just grow and adjust, he flourishes. As under the tutelage of Jiraiya, he not only gets stronger physically, but also learns how to use his Rinnegan abilities for good. Yeah, they're for good. They're for good in the beginning. Now, this includes everything from repulsion, attraction, Shibuka Tensei, the summoning of the ghetto statue from deep underground, and so much more. And while obviously summoning the ghetto statue eventually ties Nagato to the ghetto statue pretty much for the rest of his life, even when Nagato enters his controller era, he's able to control 6 bodies, all of which he shares information with through the medium of Rinnegan that they now have for some reason. Did we ever really cover that? Like, I get the chakra rods, right? But like, are the chakra rods giving them the Rinnegan? I should know that. I'm the one people ask that. Yeah, it's mostly just because he sends the chakra to that dead body, and that dead body acts as a reflection of the path that they're now named after. And part of that reflection inherently comes with the Rinnegan eyes. Okay, cool. Now I've answered my own question and possibly yours. But for anybody who genuinely believes that Nagato entering his controller era means that he got weaker, is a little bit out of line. Because while yes, Nagato, the human, did get weaker after the summoning of the ghetto statue after Yahiko's death, it should not be forgotten how the beginning of the pain invasion starts. That is, the Deva path, the path and control of attraction and repulsion, raising up in the air, and with one move, decimating the biggest ninja village in all of Naruto. And what does Nagato have to do after releasing one of the biggest attacks ever seen in the Naruto universe? Well, the Deva path needs to rest for a little bit, but everybody else is fine. And while sure, technically, the unleashing of this move does make Nagato a little bit closer to the grave, if Edo Nagato's time in the 4th Great Shinobi World War taught us anything, if Nagato just used his chakra absorption ability on his main body, he probably could have returned back to regular form. Though that might have only happened because he had an Edo Tensei body at the time. Can't necessarily say. Nagato then proceeds to, after crushing the entirety of Konoha in one move, control 5 other paths that go on to crush all the surviving ninja until Naruto shows up, and then he fights Naruto to a relative standstill. In fact, he wins until Naruto turns into Kurama and breaks out of his Chibaku Tensei. And it's important to note that that Chibaku Tensei probably would have been more powerful if Nagato hadn't just previously used an almighty push so large, it almighty pushed Konoha to the side. And thus, while we've seen wildly impressive chakra feats from people like Kushina and Karin, like Karin being able to refill the entirety of Tsunade's strength of 100 seal, and Kushina being able to use adamantite chains to not only block out Hiruzen from coming in to help in the battle against Kurama, but also to stop the entirety of Kurama from breaking out and heading back towards Konoha. And while that probably has more to do with the strength of her Fuinjutsu than the strength of her chakra, the fact fact that Kushina was doing any of that after having the entirety of Kurama ripped out of her is kind of the Chakra feat. Quite honestly, Nagato barely losing to Naruto after everything he had to go through in order to get to that battle against Naruto makes the battle more impressive for Nagato than it does for Naruto, honestly. So Nagato probably checks in somewhere in the range of 60 to 70 Kakashis, as the power of his Shibaka Tensei was almost enough to suppress the likes of Kurama, though that was only 8 Tails Kurama, and also it wasn't strong enough. But Nick, if this is a list of chakra heavy hitters, how is Nagato at 4 if there's no Otsutsukis on this list? Well, because there is kind of Otsutsukis on the list. Because coming in at number 3, we have Indra's reincarnation, Sasuke. Now, yes, I'm aware being Indra's reincarnation doesn't confer you any chakra boosts, at least so far as we know, but every single Indra reincarnation, Indra themselves, had an insane amount of chakra, so you do the math. And listen, now I know what a lot of you are gonna say.
Oh, Nick, but Sasuke's always out of chakra. How's he at number 3 on this list?
Because he has the most chakra depletive set of moves you've ever seen. Listen, Sasuke being the only character who seems to ever run out of chakra is not because he has low chakra levels. It's because he's doing things that only Otsutsukis have done for thousands of years. So let's head back to chapter 683, which we talked about when we were talking about Sakura. Obito says in this chapter that in order to resonate his Kamui with Kaguya's Yamotsu Hirasaka, he would need a massive amount of chakra. But what he follows this up by saying is because it's not my space-time. Now, this distinction is important because obviously Obito's been using space-time ninjutsu for a decade, his Kamui. But the important distinction here is that it's more difficult for Obito to use somebody else's space-time. Now, this can be taken in a couple of different ways. One, you can either take this as Obito saying it's more difficult to go to a space-time that I don't own, like the Kamui dimension, or you could take it as Obito saying because I'm not the one opening that portal, trying to reverse engineer that portal is much more difficult. And depending on which of these two ways you take that statement, heavily infers how much chakra Sasuke has now in Boruto. Because if Obito is saying something as simple as it's hard to jack into other people's space-time ninjutsus, then Sasuke opening space-time ninjutsu portals to other dimensions and using heavenly hand power is not that impressive, because that would mean that Obito's feat isn't connected to Sasuke's in any means. However, if you take this statement in the way that a lot of scalers take this statement and say that Obito is saying that by using space-time ninjutsu to access a place that he himself does not own, like the Kamui dimension, requires an insane amount of chakra, the kind of chakra you only find in a strength of 100 seal. Now, if you take the statement this way, that means if you open a space-time portal to anywhere that is not a dimension you own, like the Kamui dimension, the Daikokuten, or even Kaguya's dimensions, and travel through that portal, that requires a strength of 100 level amount of chakra, which, mind you, was more chakra than half of Naruto's Sage of Six Paths mode, which we all know wasn't at the peak of his power. He'd been fighting for a long time, but still. This means that every single time Sasuke has opened a portal to a space-time dimension that he himself did not own, and by the way, he doesn't own any, he is using a strength of 100 level amounts of chakra. That is to say that he's exhausting the entirety of Karin, a full-blooded Uzumaki's amount of chakra, every time he wants to try and fall in an Otsutsuki somewhere, which would explain why he's always out of chakra. But here's the thing. He's not always out of chakra. See, Sasuke establishes to us in the Chunin exam arc of Boruto that the more people he allows to pass through his portal, the more chakra it takes. And yet, prior to battling against Momoshiki, Sasuke opens a portal for himself, Boruto, Naruto, and the rest of the Kage, and then proceeds to box fused Momoshiki right alongside Naruto. Oh, I just remembered, he didn't open the portal for Naruto. Naruto was already there. And while this is just as impressive from Naruto, who literally just had half of his chakra pulled out prior to this battle, this means that Sasuke was able to lose a strength of 100 seal amounts of chakra and still go on to fight somebody who was possibly stronger than Kaguya, which very much backs up the verbal statement we have from Sasuke when he tells us he could 1v1 a Kaguya level threat. And this isn't the only time we've seen Sasuke use space-time ninjutsu and then proceed to get in a fight at a high level, as prior to the Chunin exams, when Sasuke was in some snowy dimension looking for traces of Otsutsuki, he bumped into Momoshiki and Kinshiki, who he fought until he realized he was in a tricky situation and then used his space-time ninjutsu to get home. So if we're assuming that Sasuke needs to exhaust a Karin level of chakra every single time he opens a space-time ninjutsu portal off to somewhere, and yet he still had enough chakra after doing that to battle against the likes of Momoshiki, Kinshiki, and Fused Momoshiki, then it's safe to assume that by opening these space-time ninjutsu portals, that probably only takes about 50% of his chakra. But here's the thing. Obito was talking about creating a portal for 4 people to follow after Kage. Sasuke, prior to the Momoshiki fight, made a portal for 6. So Sasuke, prior to the Momoshiki fight, probably exhausted more chakra than Obito had to follow after Kaguya. So if Karin, Sakura, and Tsunade clock in at around 35 Kakashis, the portal that Sasuke had to open prior to the Momoshiki fight probably clocked in around 40 Kakashis. And if we want to assume that was roughly half of his chakra, as he was still able to use all of the jutsu he needed to in the Momoshiki fight, everything from Chibaku Tensei, Susanoo, to Heavenly Hand Power, then it's safe to assume that that was only half of his chakra, and thus Sasuke has 80 Kakashis of chakra. Mind you, all of which he still has access to even after losing his 6-Tome Rinnegan, which puts Sasuke into a very similar situation to Kakashi when he became Hokage. A huge chakra level I've now built up because I had one of the most chakra depletive things of all time that I no longer have access to. Time to get super good at ninjutsu. But enough nice things about Sasuke, let's move on to characters that I actually truly enjoy. Because coming up at number 2, we have the god of shinobi himself, Hashirama. See, on the other end of the second most impressive chakra feat in all of Naruto is Hashirama, as the person who forced Madara to activate his MS for 24 straight hours was Hashirama. Now, this is slightly less impressive from Hashirama's end because he is a sage and he uses wood release that allows him to stand still and collect Senjutsu chakra, and he has an inherent advantage against tailed beasts, which Madara brought into the fight. And so not only was he suppressing the chakra of Kurama, but he was also able to basically infinitely refill his own. And on top of that, his life force was so incredibly abundant that he had automatic mitotic regeneration, meaning that if you kicked his arm off, it would just regrow. But fortunately for us, Hashirama literally told us how much chakra he had, and that is apparently peak strength Naruto, with half of Kurama spreading his chakra amongst the entire Shinobi Alliance. And while some people take Hashirama saying, oh, that's about as much chakra I had when I was alive, as Hashirama saying, I have as much chakra as half of Kurama, Kurama's chakra wasn't the only chakra being spread about the Shinobi Alliance. Obviously, Naruto's chakra is also mixed in there. That's how KCM2 works. It's a complete and total collaborative effort between the two of them, and therefore there was equal parts Kurama's chakra and Naruto's chakra being spread with everybody. And it is slightly important to note that by the time the 4th Great Shinobi World War comes around, Naruto's chakra is no longer 4 out of the 100. And by that I mean when Kakashi says, oh, Naruto's probably got 4 times the amount of chakra I have, but if you take into account Kurama, it's 100 times, Naruto's no longer at 4. Naruto's closer to 20 or 30 by that time, while Kurama's chakra is the same. Of course, what we have to take into account here is the fact that Naruto also taught Kurama how to use Sage Mode, which effectively doubles your own chakra reserves. And that's actually a fantastic segue, because Hashirama is our first live sage on this list. I say live sage because Madara became a sage after he died, and thus giving him the Senjutsu boost wouldn't have made sense because we were talking about a live Madara. And while Minato was a perfect Toad sage, we never saw him use it while he was alive, and he even said he was bad at using it. Though that is obviously immediately contradicted by the fact that he is a perfect sage. So if you wanted to give him the perfect sage boost, you could say whatever amount of Kakashis we identified for his chakra, effectively double it, and that's his maximum use chakra level, as anybody who's a perfect sage is able to pull in nature chakra into their body, mix it with their own chakra, and create Senjutsu chakra. And while the ratio is not 1-to-1, in fact, it's 50% spiritual energy, 50% physical energy, 50% nature energy. So that's chakra is 2 and nature energy is 1. That's 2-to-1. I think that's how you would say that. So in actuality, it's a 50% boost as opposed to a 100% boost. I just realized I went from 5 to 3, and at 4 I skipped Minato. Uh-oh. We're in the middle of Hashirama. All right, let's finish Hashirama and then move back to Minato at 4. The important takeaway from Hashirama's statement is that he is saying he has as much chakra as Naruto in Sage Mode while using KCM2 and Kurama. And therefore, if we assume that War Arc Naruto using KCM2 and Sage Mode simultaneously has roughly 120 Kakashis of chakra, adding Sage Mode on top of that means that Naruto actually has 180 Kakashis of chakra. That's how much chakra Hashirama is saying he had. Nobody ever remembers to take Sage Mode into account here.
Oh, Nick, didn't you say earlier that adult Naruto only has about 200 Kakashi's worth of chakra?
Yes, without Sage Mode. But since we're talking about Kurama and Sage Mode, let's go back to number 4 and talk about Minato. Listen, it's been a while since I did a top 10, all right? I'm rusty. Listen, I could talk all day long about everything that Minato accomplishes while he's alive. However, the moment that Minato dies is the most important moment when talking about how much chakra does he have. See, there is no greater jutsu in the world for scaling chakra levels other than Reaper Death Seal, because Reaper Death Seal is a chakra tug-of-war, and Minato was able to use Reaper Death Seal on half of Kurama, which could logically lead a lot of you to say, okay, cool, then Minato has half the chakra of Kurama, or just a little bit more. But no, Minato, prior to battling against Kurama, fought Obito and won. And while his battle against Obito only really cost him a couple of flying Raijin and a well-placed Rasengan, the true chakra depletive thing that Minato had to do before sealing half of Kurama into himself was sealing half of Kurama into Naruto. And we'll really have no possible way of understanding just how hard it is to seal a tailed beast into a baby in terms of chakra expenditure. It's safe to assume, considering the fact that the only people we've ever seen use this jutsu were Uzumaki, that it's not easy, especially after you use Reaper Death Seal on yourself. Because Minato, after using Reaper Death Seal to pull half of Kurama into himself, then summons a place to put Naruto down and uses the 8 trigram seal to seal Kurama into his child. And there's a couple of ways to take this night in terms of scaling the feat. You could say that, oh, Minato probably used 1, maybe 2 Kakashis in the battle against Obito, and then the sealing of Kurama into Naruto possibly cost 10 or so Kakashis, and the sealing of Kurama into himself, as we know, Reaper Death Seal is a chakra tug-of-war, required at least 97 Kakashis, which could put Minato before the activation of Sage Mode roughly around 110 Kakashis. However, that might be a highball. Because here's the thing, while this is never explicitly stated in the manga, it is stated in the anime. Outside of the adamantite chains being made out of adamantite and therefore being made out of the strongest material in Naruto, it's said in the anime that these chains are meant to neutralize a target by binding their chakra, meaning that anybody or anything that has these adamantite chains around them is having their chakra bound and nullified. And since in the moment that Minato snags Kurama's soul and seals half of it into himself, Kurama is bound with Kushina's adamantite chains. An argument could be made that Kurama's chakra was being suppressed. And considering the fact that the adamantite chains were shown to be used by Kushina inside of herself to keep Kurama chained, this line of thinking kind of tracks, but nothing along these lines is ever said in the manga. And thus it's kind of hard to say if we can give Minato the "you were able to seal half of Kurama" card, because there's a possibility he was put in an advantageous situation that just made this feat look a lot more impressive than it actually was. But if Minato truly wasn't being assisted by a nullification or a squandering of Kurama's chakra, that would put Minato's chakra in the 100 range. And with the addition of Sage Mode, it would put him at around 150, putting him in leagues with people like Hashirama and his own son. But it's hard to say. He could be lowballed much lower, because the majority of what gets him to 150 is the 96 we assume from sealing half of Kurama. So because of this, while Sasuke is hard confirmed to fall in the 80-ish range, I still put Sasuke above Minato, because 80, 85 confirmed is better than a hypothetically imbalanced 150. Because if Minato was being assisted by the suppression of the adamantite chains, and let's say Kurama was only able to access half of his chakra, that would put Minato sealing him at around 45-ish feet. And with the addition of everything else he did that night, which probably comes in around 5-ish Kakashis, that would put him somewhere in the region of 75, which would be below Sasuke. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Who do you believe has more chakra, Sasuke or Minato? Tell me in the comments. But enough about Boruto's grandfather. Let's talk about his father, because coming in at number 1 is Naruto. Listen, if Naruto gaining access to Kurama's chakra in the beginning of Shippuden was going to give him 100 times Kakashi's chakra, after which Naruto went on to increase his own chakra amount vastly, whether it be through the training to try to figure out how to make the Rasen Shuriken, the training at Mount Miyabuko, the training at the Waterfall of Truth, or just the entirety of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, Naruto puts his nose to the grindstone for the entirety of Shippuden, and it pays off. As by the end of Shippuden, Naruto has basically infinite chakra. See, like I've already stated, a perfect Sage Mode boost gives you about a 50% boost to your chakra. And if having half of Kurama gives you 96 Kakashis, then having both sides of Kurama gives you 192 Kakashis. Add that into the 20 or 30 that Naruto probably has by the time that he's Hokage. Actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, if we're assuming that Hokage Naruto only has 20 to 30 Kakashis, and that it takes 96 Kakashis to seal half of Kurama, that would mean that we're assuming that if Minato truly did use the Reaper Death Seal to seal half of a full-powered Kurama, that Minato in base has 3 times the amount of chakra as Hokage Naruto, which just doesn't sit right with me. Yeah, I don't know if I can give full validity to that feat. Like Hashirama saying, oh, this is as much chakra as I had when I was alive, makes sense when you account for the fact that he too was a sage. Sure, he didn't have the Kurama boost, but he literally had so much chakra he could just heal holes in his body. Minato? He didn't have a healing factor. That was the whole issue with the fingernail through the chest. Yeah. No, yeah, adamantite chains probably had something to do with that. This is good. was a good live videoing. Anyways, if we assume that Naruto plus Kurama clocks in around 220, if you take into account that both Naruto and Kurama are able to use Sage Mode, and Sage Mode is a 50% boost, that would mean that Naruto's peak usable chakra clocks in at around 330 Kakashis. And when you consider the fact that Kakashi is the only one of the two of them to die from chakra over usage, I guess that kind of makes sense. And with that, that's the top 10 highest chakra levels in Naruto, ranked and explained. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Is there anybody in the Naruto universe you feel as though should have been on this list but didn't make it? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. You know what? I'm sure this video made nobody angry.